Have you ever wondered why the people who seem the most composed, even admired, often feel the most invisible inside? Maybe you're one of them. Quietly strong, always capable, yet carrying a growing sense of distance, not just from others, but from yourself. Jung would call this a life lived through the persona, where the mask of strength conceals an unlived inner world. What have you had to abandon in order to be the reliable one? And what does it cost to keep that mask in place? Let's take a deeper look. You probably didn't set out to be the strong one. It wasn't a decision you made. It happened slowly, shaped by what was expected of you, or by what was missing. Maybe it started in childhood, where being emotional wasn't safe, or asking for help led to rejection. Maybe your needs were seen as too much, or simply ignored. So you adapted. You became useful, quiet, self-reliant. And over time, you got good at holding things together. You show up, you work hard, you don't make a scene. People around you might even admire how stable you seem. They lean on you, ask for your input, trust you to manage stress well. But internally, there's a subtle disconnect, like you're watching yourself perform a role rather than fully living in it. You rarely feel seen for who you really are, because what people praise you for isn't the whole story. This is where Carl Jung's concept of the persona becomes relevant. The persona is the mask we wear, not to deceive others, but to function in society. It's a necessary part of being human. But when the persona becomes too rigid, too over-identified with your sense of self, it begins to replace your authenticity. You might say, well, this is just who I am. But is it? Think about it. When was the last time you let someone see you struggle, without trying to explain it away? When was the last time you admitted, even to yourself, that you felt unsure, resentful, or overwhelmed? If that feels hard, it's not a personal failing. It's a sign you've internalized the idea that being vulnerable makes you weak, or worse, a burden. A man in his 30s might pride himself on being calm and capable. He's the friend who gives advice, the partner who fixes things. But when he's alone, he feels numb, disconnected. He doesn't even know what he wants, just that something is missing. Underneath his composed exterior is a deep, unacknowledged fatigue. The mask has become his identity. This is the psychological cost of being strong for too long. You become disconnected from your emotional reality. You lose access to the more vulnerable, uncertain parts of yourself, the parts that actually hold your aliveness. Jung believed that what we push into the unconscious doesn't disappear. It operates in the background, influencing how we think, relate, and feel. If you've denied your softer, dependent, or wounded parts in order to be functional, those parts don't vanish. They just become unconscious. And anything unconscious has power over us. So the question becomes, who are you when you're not being strong? This is where the real work begins, not in abandoning your competence, but in questioning whether it's still serving you. Is your strength a resource you choose to use, or a mask you feel trapped behind? There's nothing wrong with being strong, but when strength becomes your only language, you'll lose the ability to speak from the deeper parts of yourself. Let's keep going. As time goes on, something begins to shift. You still carry the weight, you still show up, but a quiet question starts to surface beneath your composure. Why does no one notice how tired I am? It's subtle, not rage, not drama, but a slow, simmering resentment. You do so much for others. You anticipate their needs. You absorb their emotions. And yet, when it's your turn to be supported, people seem distant, confused, or just unavailable. What you might not realize is that this isn't just a matter of circumstance. It's a pattern, one that's reinforced by how your identity has formed. If your sense of worth has been built around being the capable one, you've likely trained others, unconsciously, not to worry about you. your mask doesn't crack. Your tone stays level, your needs stay hidden. So the world assumes you're fine. This creates an emotional paradox. The more you hide your needs, the more invisible they become. And yet, the longing for care doesn't disappear. It just gets pushed further into the shadow, the unconscious part of you that holds what you've had to suppress. Jung wrote that whatever we reject in ourselves becomes part of the shadow. In this case, the part that wants to collapse, to be held, to be seen, is not allowed in your conscious self-image. So it turns into resentment, a subtle bitterness. You might start withdrawing emotionally, avoiding people who lean on you too much, or even sabotaging relationships that require too much giving. A woman in her late 20s might be known for being low maintenance in her relationships. She rarely complains. She says she's fine when she's not, and deep down, she's furious, but doesn't know how to express it without feeling guilty or ashamed. The resentment isn't because others are bad, it's because she's never learned how to let herself need. So ask yourself, have you ever wanted someone to just know what you need without having to say it? That wish often points to a part of you that still hopes to be rescued without risking vulnerability. But here's the deeper truth. If you've trained the world to see your strength, it will take conscious, uncomfortable effort to untrain it. Not through blame, but through new honesty. With yourself first. This resentment isn't wrong. It's information. It's telling you something vital. Your current identity isn't big enough to hold all of who you are. You might be surrounded by people, family, friends, co-workers, yet still feel profoundly alone, not because they don't care, but because something inside you feels unreachable. This is not the loneliness of social distance. It's the loneliness of inner disconnection. A sense that you're living behind glass, watching life happen around you, but not really in it. You might function well, keep up with routines, even laugh at the right times. But there's a flatness underneath, a lack of felt connection. This is where the persona's cost becomes more visible. When we over-identify with a role, the helper, the leader, the problem solver, we lose access to the parts of ourselves that feel, long, doubt, and grieve. Over time, this creates fragmentation. The self becomes split between what is shown and what is hidden. Jung spoke of the exile of the soul, the deep forgetting of the inner world. You've become so practiced at being who others need you to be that you no longer know what you need. And this creates a form of emotional isolation that's difficult to name. A man in his 40s might have a successful career, a family, a stable life, but feels like he's performing all of it. There's no crisis, no breakdown, just a persistent sense that something is missing. He's not failing, he's just disconnected from himself. This is often the stage where people begin numbing, not dramatically, but in subtle, socially acceptable ways, overworking, scrolling, consuming, distracting. Because to sit still would be to face a self they no longer know how to access. So let me ask, when was the last time you felt truly connected, not just to someone else, but to yourself? When you weren't trying to prove anything or hold it together, just present, real, alive? If you don't remember, that's not your fault. It's the result of a survival strategy that worked, until it didn't. You're not broken, you're disconnected, and that disconnection can be reversed, but only by turning inward and learning to relate to the parts of you that have been silenced for too long. The loneliness you feel isn't a flaw, it's a signal, a call back to your inner life. You might not realize how disconnected you've become from your own emotional reality, not because you're numb by nature, but because you've learned over time to ignore what doesn't help you function. This is common in people who carry long-term responsibility. You learn to move forward quickly, to stay composed, to push through discomfort. And after a while, emotions become background, noise, distractions you don't have time for. You might say things like, "It's not a big deal," or "I'm just tired," or "I'm fine," even when something deeper is happening. But that constant dismissal builds up. The emotions don't disappear. They simply go underground. You lose touch with the signals your psyche is trying to send you. Jung referred to this as the inferior function, the part of the psyche we've left underdeveloped, often in the feeling realm. Strong, high-functioning people often become emotionally blind, not because they don't have depth, but because they've learned to devalue that depth in favor of control. A man who's always been calm under pressure might notice that he never cries, even when something tragic happens. Or a woman who's everyone's emotional support may find that she can't answer the question, "What are you feeling right now?" without defaulting to what she should feel. This isn't dysfunction, it's adaptation. And it makes sense. In environments where emotions weren't mirrored, you had to figure out how to regulate yourself alone. But there's a cost. Without access to your inner emotional landscape, you become detached from your real needs. You stop recognizing what hurts, what excites, what you long for. You become a version of yourself that knows how to operate, but not how to live. So pause and ask, when you're upset, do you know why? When you're anxious, can you locate the fear beneath it? When you say you're fine, is that really true or just a habit? You can't heal what you can't feel, and you can't feel until you stop outrunning the parts of yourself you were taught to ignore. This isn't about becoming emotional, it's about becoming real. At first, being capable felt empowering. You figured things out, you took care of people, you kept things moving, and the world responded well. People praised your maturity, your strength, your reliability. But slowly, competence turned into something else, a shield, a way to stay safe, a way to avoid needing anything from anyone. You became the person who has it together, not because it's always true, but because it's expected. And over time, you internalized that expectation. You had to be the one who knows what to do. You had to be the calm one, the one who doesn't break down. But here's the paradox. When competence becomes your identity, you start to fear your own humanity. The idea of not knowing, not fixing, not helping, it feels like failure. And so you keep performing, even when you're empty. Jung would call this the moment the persona hardens. What was once a flexible way of relating becomes a rigid mask. And anything behind that mask, confusion, weakness, desire, anger, feels dangerous. So it gets buried. Imagine a young professional who's always been praised for being high-achieving. She excels in every role, handles stress quietly, and keeps her life in order. But she never lets anyone close. She avoids vulnerability at all costs. And when things finally fall apart, a breakup, a panic attack, a loss, she feels not just grief, but shame. This isn't who I'm supposed to be. But that reaction is the trap. You've confused your competence with your value. And so when your competence slips, you feel like you disappear with it. What happens when you're no longer performing? When there's nothing to fix, no one to help? Who are you then? This isn't about abandoning your competence. It's about realizing that it's not your core self. It's just one part of you. Real strength isn't needing to be capable at all times. It's being able to build your own humanity, even when it's messy, uncertain, or weak. And that's where real freedom begins. At some point, you may begin to feel something deeper than exhaustion, a vague but persistent sense that you've left parts of yourself behind. Maybe it shows up as boredom in a life that looks good on paper. Maybe it comes as envy of people who seem freer, more spontaneous. Or maybe it arrives as a quiet sadness you can't quite name. Jung called this the unlived life, the aspects of our personality, our desires, and our instincts that we repressed to adapt and survive. They don't vanish, they just go underground. And eventually, they begin to surface, not as thoughts, but as symptoms. Depression, resentment, restlessness, self-sabotage. This is not about failure, it's about imbalance. You've developed one part of yourself, the competent, reliable, self-contained part, and it helped you get here. But the other parts, the creative, emotional, sensual, needy, chaotic parts, were never invited in. They're still waiting. A man in his 40s might find himself fantasizing about leaving his career, moving to the countryside, and starting over, not because he truly wants to farm goats, but because his psyche is starving for authenticity. A woman who spent her life supporting others might start feeling intense, unexplainable anger, not at anyone in particular, but at the years of self-abandonment she never let herself acknowledge. Jung warned, what you do not bring to consciousness appears in your life as fate. If you don't confront your unlived life, it won't stay quiet. It will shape your choices from the shadows. You may keep achieving, succeeding, performing, but inside something will always feel incomplete. So ask yourself, what have you given up in order to be who you were supposed to be? What dreams did you edit out because they didn't fit the role you were handed? The path forward is not about reclaiming everything, it's about consciously choosing what belongs to you, not what was expected of you. Your unlived life is not a threat, it's a doorway, if you're willing to open it. By now, you might be feeling the tension. Part of you longs for freedom, authenticity, rest. And yet, something in you resists. It's not just habit, it's fear. The fear that if you let go of control, of responsibility, of strength, everything will fall apart. People might stop relying on you. You might become irrelevant, or worse, you might have to face the feelings you've spent years managing quietly. This fear isn't irrational. For many, vulnerability did come with consequences. You may have learned early on that your emotions made others uncomfortable, or that asking for help led to rejection. Over time, your nervous system adapted. You didn't just build a persona, you built protection. And now, letting go feels like danger, not healing. Jung described this process as shadow confrontation, facing the parts of ourselves we've exiled, not intellectually but emotionally. You may start to feel grief for a childhood that never allowed you to be soft. You may feel anger at how much you've suppressed to be good, successful, or stable. You may feel terror in realizing that you don't know how to let someone else carry the weight, because no one ever did. Imagine a man who's always been the provider, emotionally and financially. When someone offers to support him, even kindly, he feels rage. Why? Because it threatens the foundation of his identity. If he's not needed, who is he? This is the ego's resistance. The false self fears death because it thinks it is you. But you are not your defenses. You are not your achievements. You are not your usefulness. So ask yourself gently, what do you believe will happen if you stop being strong? Letting go doesn't mean collapse. It means allowing space for what's been hidden. It means honoring the parts of you that need rest, care, permission. It's not regression, it's integration. This fear is but a stop sign. It's a signal you're getting closer to your real self. Breakdown and breakthrough. When the persona begins to fracture and the real self quietly starts to emerge. You've kept it together for so long, you might not notice when you start falling apart. Because for people who've built a life around strength, Collapse doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes it comes as subtle erosion, a kind of slow emotional fading. You wake up tired, not just physically but existentially. Things you used to enjoy feel distant. You still do what needs to be done, but the spark is gone. You feel detached in conversations. You don't want to explain what's wrong because you don't know. And maybe you're afraid that, if you did know, it would be too much. This is not failure. This is the system you built finally running out of energy. The armor you wore, the persona, is no longer sustainable, and your unconscious knows it. Jung didn't view collapse as pathology. He saw it as the psyche's attempt to rebalance itself. When the false self can no longer carry the weight, something deeper insists on being seen. And at first, that arrival feels like a breakdown. You might find yourself crying unexpectedly, withdrawing from social obligations, or feeling sudden waves of meaninglessness. It's not that something dramatic happened. It's that your inner structure is shifting. The parts of you that were suppressed are surfacing, and because they were never allowed in the light, they show up as confusion. A high-functioning woman in her 30s who's always held everything together, career, family, social life, might find herself staring at a wall, unable to move. There's nothing wrong, yet everything feels off. She tells herself she's just burned out. But underneath that, her psyche is asking, what part of you have you abandoned to stay in control? This collapse is a threshold. You can try to patch it up, to return to normal, or you can pause. Listen. Let it fall gently. Not your life, not your relationships, just the performance, the image. The identity that can no longer contain your complexity. So here's the question. What if this emptiness isn't a problem to fix, but a space being cleared, for you to finally come home to yourself? When you stop performing strength, something unexpected happens. You don't become weak. You become honest. You start to feel things again, slowly, hesitantly. You notice moments of sadness that don't need to be explained. Small, quiet joys. Frustrations that have been sitting for years. The emotional color returns to your life, not all at once, but in fragments. This is the beginning of integration. Jung believed that healing doesn't mean eliminating your shadow, your persona, or your ego. It means relating to them differently. It means making space for all the parts you pushed away and holding them without judgment. You begin to speak more truthfully. Maybe you tell a friend, I don't have the energy to carry this right now. Maybe you admit, I feel lost, and don't follow it up with a solution. You let yourself be seen, not for your usefulness, but for your being. This is not easy. For someone used to being the strong one, authenticity can feel awkward, even shameful. But over time, it becomes relief. You no longer have to perform your value. You start to feel it, not because of what you do, but because you exist. A man in his 50s, long admired for his composure and leadership, begins to share his inner doubts with his adult children. He admits he doesn't have all the answers. And something unexpected happens. Connection deepens. Not because he's in control, but because he's real. You begin to see strength differently. Not as stoicism, not as self-sacrifice, but as the courage to be whole. That includes your fear, your needs, your sensitivity. So ask yourself, can you live in a way that doesn't require you to be impressive all the time? Can you be human, not heroic? This is the quiet return, not a dramatic transformation, not a complete reinvention, just a slow, steady reintroduction to the person you were before you had to prove yourself. And in that return is peace. You've spent much of your life trying to be strong, and maybe you succeeded. Maybe people admire you, rely on you, look to you for stability. But deep down, you know something else now. Strength alone is not the goal. There comes a point when perfection becomes too heavy, when managing your image, meeting expectations, and doing what's right begins to cost too much, not just in energy, but in selfhood. You begin to sense that your value can't come from being unbreakable. It has to come from being whole. Jung taught that individuation, becoming who you truly are, is not about becoming better. It's about becoming complete. That includes your light and your shadow, your confidence and your fear, your clarity and your confusion. You stop asking, "Am I doing this right?" and start asking, "Is this mine?" A woman who spent decades being the emotional backbone of her family might one day choose silence over pleasing, not out of rebellion, but out of self-respect. A man who's always been the achiever might let go of a title, not because he failed, but because it no longer reflects his truth. This isn't about being soft or passive or giving up. It's about shifting from performance to presence. You stop needing to earn your place and start inhabiting it. You begin to relate to yourself as someone worth knowing, not fixing. So pause for a moment. Let this in. There's no version of you that's more worthy than the one that already exists. Have you noticed how hard you've worked to prove you're enough? What happens when you stop? This is what strength looks like now. Choosing rest when you used to push, asking for help when you used to stay silent, showing up authentically, even if it means being seen in your uncertainty. You are not your mask. You are not your history. You are not the role you've played. You are the one who lived through it, adapted to it, and is now ready to return to yourself piece by piece, honestly, quietly. This is the journey of individuation, not toward perfection, but toward wholeness. And that is what you've been searching for all along.